Hi, it's Jan Beta, and as you probably know if you're following this channel for a bit, I'm a huge fan of the Commodore Amiga line of computers, mostly because I had several Amigas back in the day myself, and I cherish them a lot. And today I want to talk about something that I was asked questions about quite a lot recently, and that is how to manage to transfer files and especially whole disks from PCs like modern operating systems to the good old Amiga. And there's several ways to do that. I'm going to show you some, especially the ones that I have tried and know that work for me, and talk a bit about the process. And maybe you have other ways. There are a million ways basically, because there's so many new peripherals for this that you can use to achieve this, and so many old school ways of doing this. I'm just going to show you a couple that I used and that work for me. So if you have any other ideas, put them in the comments below, and people can read the comments and get more ideas. This is more of an inspirational thing to show you how it can be done. Let me take a second to thank my sponsor PCBWay, who are a PCB manufacturer that offer everything you need for your prototype PCB manufacturing, and they have very reasonable prices and really fast turnaround times. So highly recommend checking them out if you are into making your own circuit boards, which a lot of people in the retro computing scene are, including myself. So let's start with the easiest one, which is a method that works for the A1200 and the A600, if you have those. Commodore made a lot of mistakes, obviously, in their later years when they released these computers, but they had the idea of putting a PCMCIA port into the A1200 and the A600 because it is a relatively small in size way of connecting all kinds of peripherals, really. This is not a full-fledged, up to the full PCMCIA specifications, because I believe, if I understood it correctly, the specifications weren't even all worked out when Commodore released the A1200, and let alone the A600, which was released before. But this still works with a lot of PCMCIA peripherals that are out there, like network adapters and the device I'm going to show you in a second, which is this, a compact flash adapter for the PCMCIA port. Many of these work with the A1200 and the A600, and yeah, basically it's just PCMCIA on this side, and you can plug in a little CF card. And obviously there's all kinds of card readers for modern systems that mostly just connect via USB. Some of them are connected internally. I really can recommend getting like a USB 3 one. These are very recent, these are incredibly fast, and they have, this one has like SD and a CF and I think memory stick and all kinds of stuff you might need anyway if you are looking into getting a retro computer collection. So these things, absolutely, they cost next to nothing. These things are very cheap as well. The CF cards often are very cheap as well. I recommend using like smaller sizes. This is a 256 megabyte, which appears to be a sweet spot, because if you get too large ones, the Amiga, depending on the ROM version and the operating system, might struggle with it. I think they work fine up to 4 gigabytes even, but I found for transferring files, which is the primary use of this thing for me, 256 megabytes or 128 megabytes are very convenient. And these are like really cheap as well. If you get, especially if you look for used compact flash conglomerate auctions on eBay or stuff like that, you get these pretty cheap. I have a couple that I can interchange, and yeah, it's very useful to have some. So how does it work with the PCMCIA card? Well, basically, you just format them in one of the FAT file formats, like a Windows standard file format. And there is a device driver on the A1200 that, in my particular case, it came with a disk. You of course need some way to install the driver on your system so you can actually use this. There are sets that come with the disk, like the one I bought. The PCMCIA adapter came with this ADF transfer driver and software. This is free software, so I'm going to put a disk image of this in the description, but of course you need some way of putting the software on your computer or starting it there to be able to use the CF card reader. So I can recommend just get someone who can make disks to make a disk for you, or get one of those sets, which are usually not that expensive as well. And then you install the software, and I'm going to show you how it works. So the CF card is in the adapter, and it's formatted using the FAT file format. So I'm going to put it in a little slot in my Amiga 1200. And it sticks out quite a bit. This is pretty, yeah, it's not very handy for having this permanently attached. This is meant to also fit the double height PCMCIA things. On some notebooks and laptops, you have like the double, like two slots on top of each other, and you can just use the bottom slot for the double height things. In this case, there's only one slot, so you have to have it stick out like this. And then I'm going to boot up the Amiga 1200. Which also has a disk drive still in it, so I'm just, even though I have installed the drivers already, I'm just going to put the little disk I showed you previously in, and it says ADF transfer, and yeah, there's a hard disk installation which will install the drivers, and the drivers are then going to be located in your system drive, and it's under storage, and it's under DOS drivers, and then the driver is called CF0. This is the Compact Flash CF driver, and you have to, you can auto start this, but I tend to not auto start this because I'm not using this all the time, so you just can on the Amiga, as it turns out, just double click this, and the driver is installed in the system, and you can just access the CF card, which I conveniently called CF. You can of course put your own name in here. And there's a lot of stuff on here that you can't see in Workbench because, yeah, Workbench doesn't work that way. You have to have an icon file for each file to show it standard. But you can show all files, and then you have all the stuff in here. For example, Amber Moon, the English version of Amber Moon that I used this on. There's the ADFs, which are the disks files for Amber Moon, which I'm currently playing on my Twitch on and off. Which I'm going to link again in this video to promote it. So, how do I make real disks from the disks files that I can of course just copy with everything I have, like all the file management tools I have on the Amiga. I can copy files from here to my hard disk, which in this case is also a CF card. But you can use regular hard disks and stuff like that. It's no problem at all. Works very nicely and sufficiently fast for the Amiga. And I can of course also use my file managers. Like I like to use Diskmaster, which is the old version I had back in the day. I didn't upgrade or anything, so it's okay. So you can just start up your CF card here, and yeah. Because I used my MacBook to access this, there's a lot of these point files I don't really like. But yeah, as you see, there's a lot of stuff on there that I just can copy over to anywhere I want, basically. So you might ask, how do I make disks from the disk files I just transferred to my Amiga? That's pretty easy because there's pretty convenient tools for that, and I'm going to show you at least one. And also link the tools in below for your convenience. There is the first one that I use all the time, actually, is ADF-er. No way of if this is the right way to pronounce it. And I think there's a newer version than the one I have, but I'm just going to show you this. This is a very, very simple program from the GUI standpoint. It just has 3 buttons: write, quit, and read. Quit quits the program. Write writes an ADF file to a real floppy disk. Read reads a floppy disk and saves an ADF file from the floppy disk. So this is very convenient for, let's just do it. I'm just putting in a disk, which is an empty double density disk, and I'm going to write. And now it asks me in a like a standard requester kind of thing where my disk files are. And I have like the advanced Amiga analyzer here. I can just do another PCMCIA adapter disk because I have this saved as an ADF here for maybe when it doesn't work sometimes. So I'm just going to click OK, and it's going to write the ADF on the disk. It doesn't take very long. This is a pretty quick little way of doing that. And you can do this with all kinds of ADF files unless it is a protected file, which yeah, you're pretty much out of luck with this method. Bong! Okay, we're ready. We can quit. And now we should have our disk here. The ADF transfer disks, which already appeared there. Look at that. There we are. ADF transfer and all our files should be there like on the disk. Yeah, there we go. ADF Blitzer, which is the older version of ADF-er, really. That's another one of those. That's the one, I think this is the best known one. It's like very similar, but it doesn't have the progress bar, and some of the error handling has been refined. And I believe ADF-er is also a bit faster than this. Yeah, but this is basically the same program. ADF-er is derived from this ADF Blitzer. I'm going to link both programs below from Aminet. I think you can get the programs which are free to download. And while I'm here, I want to show you another one that I use very frequently, and I used it for installing Ambermoon, which comes on like, I think 9 disks. And I just transferred the ADFs over and thought, wow, should I make 9 disks? No, of course I won't. For these cases, there's Image Mount, which is a very handy program that allows you to mount disk images or hard disk images, and the system believes they are a real disk or hard disk. So I can just mount an ADF from my ADF folder, wherever it is. There it is. I can just mount the advanced Amiga analyzer or some ADF I downloaded off the internet or something like that. So now I have mounted my ADF. This is a very simple program, but for most times it is sufficient. I think there's more sophisticated stuff, but I didn't need it yet. So here's my analyzer disk that I just mounted with the Amiga analyzer software that you've probably seen me use before on this channel. Yeah, very convenient little program. I'm going to link that in below as well. Speaking of CF cards, if you're running a CF card as a hard disk replacement in your IDE-enabled Amiga, you can also use WinUAE and one of those CF card adapters for your modern PC, WinUAE being the most important Amiga emulator that there currently is, and it's the most versatile as well. You can just put your CF card in here and mount it as a disk drive in WinUAE, as a real drive basically. I've made a video about installing a whole workbench system on a CF card with this method a while back, but the steps remained the same, so I'm going to link the video in the corner there and below. It's about my AL1200 system installation that I still run actually from the same CF card I used back then. And that's a very cool way to have an Amiga formatted CF card and transfer files from your PC hard disk, which you can also mount as a PC partition that you can also access through the Amiga in WinUAE. So WinUAE is really convenient considering this stuff. I don't use it that much because my CF card hard disk in my Amiga 1200 is built in a way so that I can't access it without opening the case. There's also CF adapters that like have a little opening where you can get the CF card out, so you would use this method preferably, probably because it's really convenient to have like your system, your whole system on your PC, and you can also start it, of course, because you're running it in an emulator. You can start your system and just copy files to and from PC drives, no problem at all. Another very popular method of getting disk files to and from your Amiga is the GoTech drive, which is a relatively cheap disk drive emulator. It's like a universal disk drive emulator, which you can flash firmware on. I'm going to make a video about that in probably some weeks. I'm working on that already. You can flash firmware on that supports the Amiga drives, the Atari drives, CPC drives, MS-DOS compatible drives, all kinds of drives. These are very useful if you are in retro computing of any kind. It's very highly recommend getting one of these because they are very versatile, and you can just put a USB stick in there that is formatted with the FAT file system again, and just copy files on that or from that, and this can just be connected like a regular disk drive in your old machines. And sometimes you have to mind the polarity a bit. I think in the Amigas it's the opposite polarity from what the original drives are, but yeah, there's like a pin 1 indicator here, and it's pretty self-explanatory if you ask me. So you can just hook up your GoTech as if it was a real drive, and then select disk images. This one is a fancy one that has like a rotary encoder knob. Usually you have like 2 little push buttons which you can choose the disk image from. This one has a little display. Some of them have only like a 7-segment display where you can see the number of the disk image that is selected, and then that is treated like a real disk by the computer. So that's very handy. You just copy your ADFs that you copied from somewhere on a little USB stick and use them in your Amiga. Very inexpensive and convenient way of doing this. And you can, of course, copy files with like regular copy programs, like Xcopy, for example, most prominently, and use this as if it was a regular drive. I recommend to get the flash floppy firmware because it's, in my opinion, it's the most versatile while it is free. You can just download it and flash it, which is something I'm going to show in a separate video because it would be a bit long. I have an older Gotek that I want to flash anyway, and I'm just going to do that in another video. Obviously, for transferring files, you can just put these in one of the external enclosures for external disk drives for the Amiga that you can just... They have the same connectors inside. And of course you can mount the ADF files in an emulator and like modify them and put files on the ADF disk images that you can then access through this in your real Amiga. Another relatively easy way of transferring files between Amigas and modern PCs is using a disk drive, either an internal one or one of the external ones. This is a USB IBM drive that I just love the look of. But yeah, you can basically format disks in the FAT format again and use them in your Amiga. Depending which Amiga you have, most standard Amigas only have double density drives, so they will only be able to read 720 kilobyte formatted MS-DOS disks, double density disks, which this is one. If you can also use HD disks, which don't work with all drives, but most of the times they do work in my experience, you can just close the extra hole, which is the indicator for the drive that this is an HD disk, to make it look to the drive as if it was a double density disk. So this formats in 720 kilobytes. I think Windows XP and later versions don't support this anymore, formatting disks as 720 kilobytes, so you have to use the DOS command. I believe in Linux and other operating systems it's not that much of a problem. Some of these drives don't support double density disks because they don't even have like a sensor to determine if it's a double density disk, and the drivers don't, they just don't support it. So I have connected my disk drive via USB and put the DD disk in. And now even in Windows 10 I can go, not format C, format A, which is always the disk drive, and format it for 80 tracks. And no idea what this means. But this should format our disks as 720K. At least it does something. Oh, can't format. Okay, so my external drive doesn't work with 720K disks, which is a bummer. Okay, so this particular drive doesn't seem to work with a 720K drive, but I have workarounds for that. I'm just going to use this, which is my Dell Latitude laptop that I repaired some videos ago. I hope it still works. Yeah, it seems good. Yeah, the problem is with these USB drives, they sometimes don't support 720 kilobyte disks, which mine didn't, obviously. You can use those for 1.44 megabyte disks, no problem, which also work in the Amigas if they have an HD disk drive, which is pretty rare in Amigas, but some A4000s have them, and some A1200s also have them, I think. Yeah, so this kind of takes me back. I'm just going to insert the disk and see if that works here. There's our disk drive. At least it does something. Don't know if I've tried this disk drive before, actually. It's ridiculously slow, obviously. Okay, format. So there we are. And it says 1.44 and 720K. Okay. So we want to do this full, I think. So let's see if this works. This turned out more complicated than I thought. I remember using this method actually to back up the hard disk from my Amiga 2000 when I switched to PC. And I painstakingly copied all the files on disks and copied them to the PC with the method we are about to see. Oh hey, and we're done. Looks good. Okay, let's close this and just copy some random file over there. I think I'm just going to just copy the auto-exec BAT. Copy just for the kicks. It's, of course, this is completely useless, but yeah. So now we can paste it here. It should copy the auto-exec. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Kind of love Windows 98, but I also kind of hate it a lot. So back to the Amiga, and I can actually just put this disk in, and it should show up on the desktop as a readable disk after a while. Oh, there we are. It's a cross-DOS disk, and there's my auto-exec BAT. Which I could then, oh, I didn't give it a name, so it just shows me random letters here. Yeah, this says cross-DOS. Cross-DOS is a driver for the Amiga that allows it to read PC disks, which is included since, I think, Kickstart ROM version 2.04, at least 2.1, it is included in the system. So on the Amiga we have to install the driver, and that's one of the easiest things ever, because in this case we have to show all files, because we need the devs and the DOS drivers there, and we need the storage that we used before, where there is the drivers that are not used all the time. They're here, and we find PC0 and PC1 in here, which are the cross-DOS drivers for drive 0, which is the internal disk drive usually, and the DF1 external or second internal drive. We can just drag them over here. So everything that's in this folder, devs, DOS drivers, is going to be used as a DOS driver. And yeah, if you drag this over there and copy it here, we have both drives as basically as PC drives. I think you can also change this to work with more drives. Yeah, you can just put another unit number here, I believe, and then have it work with another drive even. But usually what I do usually is to put PC0 in here, so my internal drive also reads PC disks. If there is a PC disk in there, it displays the name of the PC disk, which we left blank, so it slightly irritates cross-DOS, but it seems our auto-exec BAT still works. Yeah, and we could potentially copy stuff over to the PC and from the PC in this way. So these are some of the methods I regularly use to transfer files between modern operating systems and Amigas. And yeah, I hope this was informative for you. Let me know what other methods you use. I know there is a bunch of others, especially considering using the network connectivity and the serial ports and stuff like that. But I didn't want to go into that in this video because it already is pretty long, and this is just a quick one to just point out some of the methods I regularly use. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you found it informative and maybe inspiring to get your old Amiga out again and connect it to the modern world with one of these methods. Yeah, thanks for watching. I'm Jan Beta. See you next time. Bye.